What's up, humans? Welcome to another episode of Humans of the Multiverse.
Our goal is to bring people together by featuring the stories of our friends from all over the globe.
We want to share our interests with the world, and that's why we started this show.
So if you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. Press the like button and subscribe to our channel.
And if you have a compelling story to tell, send us an email.
Thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, Dave here. This is a special episode for the 4th of July with my good friend and mentor, Walt Rutherford, for his second appearance on the show. Walt is a combat veteran of the Vietnam War, a veteran advocate, and spent his career serving the veteran community as a mental health counselor. He helped start the first vet center in the country, which now provides mental health services at over 300 locations across the country. He is a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. To hear Walt's full story, including his time in Vietnam, check out his earlier episode in our Humans of the Multiverse playlist. I hope you enjoy this conversation between two combat veterans from different generations talking about what it means to be American, the challenges veterans face, and the biggest issue in the veteran community, PTSD. Walt and I were just talking about how the VA is a pain in the ass, but also we're grateful for it. It's sort of I was on the phone with the VA for like 3 hours this morning. That's why we're talking about this. But I just wanted to start the show by saying it's a special episode of Mike and Dave's Humans of the Multiverse. Mike's not here. He had to work today. But we wanted to do an episode for the 4th of July to bring back a good friend of our show, Walter Wonderful, Mr. Walt Rutherford. He's a dear old friend of mine and mentor of mine, and we've had him on the show before, and we've got multiple requests to bring Walter Wonderful back. So here he is. Welcome back to the Multiverse. Walt, how's it going?
Thank you, Dave, and happy 4th of July.
Yes, yeah. This episode is actually specifically for the 4th of July. We're releasing a couple veterans chopping it up on the 4th of July. So thank you so much and happy 4th of July. Back to you. I actually wanted to just really quick, because I don't know if anybody knows this off the top of their head, but it's the federal holiday commemorating the adoption of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, when the 13 American colonies declared their independence from British rule. Celebrated annually. We do the fireworks, we do the parades, we do the barbecues, we do the public gatherings. But I think what gets lost in the shuffle, this happens with Memorial Day too, is the veterans. Everyone goes and on Memorial Day weekend, and they have a barbecue, and they go on the lake or whatever, and and the veterans almost get lost in the shuffle. Veterans Day is for veterans for sure, but Memorial Day and 4th of July, I think should be similarly celebrating the veterans who not only fought and died, but also just the ones that didn't die, the ones that sacrificed their body and their mind for the freedoms that most of us take for granted, including myself on some days, right, Walt?
Absolutely. And you're one of those guys, Dave.
I know. I don't know. It feels like a million years ago, but yeah, you are too.
Yeah. And recently I've been able to enjoy some of these holidays, even though there's a mixed message here. I remember 4th of July as this great party celebration. I grew up in a town of 1,000 people, and everybody knew everybody. Everybody was white. There were no people of color there. There was no Jews, no Hispanics, no Muslims, just a bunch of white people thinking they were all different. Right. But the 4th of July was a big, big deal. Have a parade in town. All of the boys wore their Boy Scout uniforms or their Little League uniforms and marched in this parade. And afterwards, the entire town was invited to the firehouse for sandwiches, like salami sandwiches and ham sandwiches on that squishy white bread, Wonder Bread, which my mom never would buy, but I always wanted to have, like all the other kids.
Mm-hmm.
And hot dogs. It was a big day for
Hot
hot dogs.
dogs, for sure.
So that was my memory of 4th of July until I went to Vietnam.
Mm.
And of course, in Vietnam, while I was there, I didn't have the ability to have a parade or anything else like
Right.
that. And when I came home, 4th of July was a nightmare for me.
Mm.
Getting better now, but I was like our dog at the time, who on 4th of July would quickly run into the bathroom and hide in the bathtub from all the sound and the vibration from the fireworks, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, to me, as one veteran, and I'd love to hear your take on this too, David, it really hit me very clearly how war-oriented our country is.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you look at the Star Spangled Banner and you listen to the words of that, it's all about praising soldiers in war and their resilience and their etc. And then the fireworks come, and it's like being in a firefight.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's loud noises, and yes, and for the most part, my first year back, I was so excited about the fireworks. I couldn't sleep for a couple of days afterward. It really impacted me and took me back to the battlefield with all of the idea of the fireworks being kind of like artillery shells.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that. Because it's similar experience with me. I mean, we had different wars. You were in Vietnam and I was Iraq, but still, the fireworks were still there. And actually, I don't know. I was cleaning a closet today, Walt, and I actually found something that I felt like sharing for show and tell. Now, I'm not going to tell this story, okay, like in any detail, because I don't tell anyone, including my therapist. But here's a piece of shrapnel from an improvised explosive device that almost took me out. And I put it in my pocket and then put it in my tough box and then sent it home with me. And every once in a while I pull this thing out. And I'm like, I just look at it and I'm like, wow, like this was like this thing was that close. That's what I'll tell you. And so I had a similar experience with fireworks. It doesn't bother me so much anymore because I did a lot of. We'll talk about the VA here in a little bit, but because I did a lot of therapy through the VA and a lot of mindfulness and meditation on my own and a lot of personal healing journeys and stuff like that. But yeah, I similarly remember first getting back and not being ready for that. I thought I didn't realize it was going to do that to me. And it did. Yeah. And it happened to be in a very one particular time was in a very public place. I was in the middle of it was in San Diego at a baseball game on the 4th of July. And I was with some friends and they start shooting off fireworks, literally like 20 feet from where we were sitting. Like I'd never, I just got up and bailed. I jumped in my car and left. And my friends were like, "What happened to Dave?" And
where's Dave?
Yeah, I just literally went beeline for the for the parking structure and left. Yeah, I just did. I was like it was like a automatic reaction or something like that.
Of course.
And so
yeah.
it is interesting that the whole fireworks thing is meant to celebrate the United States and meant to celebrate, like, you know, the Star Spangled Banner and all that stuff. And most veterans who've seen action hate that.
Well, you know, Dave, I think that the important thing about it not only is our reaction to the loud noise and the light and et cetera, and reminders of combat, that somehow or another this all fits together with how wars are sold to us.
Correct.
Because along with the whole idea that soldiers are real men, real women, and the guys that don't serve are not. And I'm sure it's happened to you, but for me, so many times people have shared with me a kind of shame for not being a combat vet. And because we were sold on the idea that as Americans, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to save the world, and you're supposed to save your country, and you're supposed to do what you're told. And, you know, a lot of that stuff goes into decisions why to volunteer for service. Or I know with you guys that are post 9/11 vets, there was something there where our country was attacked, and many of the vets that I've spoken with about that feel like that was a calling. I want to do something for my country. I want to take care of something. And that call was kind of irresistible for many people.
We are being sold a war. We're being so, and I can't tell you, Walt, how many times that's happened to me where, like, I usually don't advertise the fact that I served in the military or that I'm a combat veteran. It comes up, but when it does, a lot of times people are like, oh, that's so, thank you for your service. You know, I wish I could have signed up, but this happened, or, you know, I wanted to join, but yada, yada. And like, they feel like they're ashamed that they didn't sign up or that they should have. And they tell me that their uncle did, and their dad might've, and this and that. And then I get praised for it as if I like did something like, I don't know. I just don't feel like I'm any better or stronger. I just happened to buy into the propaganda at the right time. You know what I mean?
Amen, brother. Amen.
I was a target because I was poor. I did not have any opportunities where I was living. I was getting in trouble with the law, and this was my way out. And I was being sold that, Walt. I remember the commercial on TV that made me join the military. I joined the Army because I found out the Marines was like a little bit crazier, but the commercial was for the Marine Corps. And this guy, he's this regular citizen, and then he's like climbing this mountain. And he gets to the top, and there's a dragon up there, and he fights a dragon. And then all of a sudden he's in his dress blue uniforms, and he's like the few, the proud, the Marines. And then my dad gets home from work, and I'm like, hey, Dad, I think I'm going to join the Marines. And he's like, bullshit. And then he pulls out a DVD and he puts on a Full Metal Jacket. And I watched that, and I'm like, okay, maybe not the Marines, Dad, but my dad had served in the Navy during Vietnam, and so I was like, I don't want to do the Navy, but there was an Army National Guard base near me, so I ended up calling them, and 2 weeks later I was off to basic training. But it's just, when I look back at like how vulnerable I was at 22 years old to that kind of propaganda, and then we're going to talk about PTSD here in a bit and how the VA came to accept PTSD. But, when it comes to PTSD, most of my return PTSD came from the fact that I was lied to, the fact that I was manipulated, the fact that when I got to Iraq, I felt like everything I was sold was bullshit. And so then one of the first things I started doing when I got home was like digging into the truth behind who made money off of those wars and which politicians lied. And that was a real nightmare for me because I love this country, Walt. I love what it stands for. I love, the Declaration for the Right to Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. I love the First and Second Amendments of the United States of America. I think they're what sets us apart from every other country. And I love the freedoms that we're afforded, and I love the freedoms that are afforded or that we afford to immigrants in this country when they come through the proper channels. But war, I can tell you right now, I can't think of a single one that wasn't bullshit, that wasn't full of lies and propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, David. And, I fully concur with you on everything you said. Would you tell us, please, what you did in combat?
Well,
I think it's significant.
Without getting into too much detail, my job was as a combat medic for a cavalry scout unit in Iraq, and we did we spent a lot of time on the road, and that's where this kind of thing comes in. So we experienced a lot of these IEDs and things like that, and yeah, as you can imagine, like all the jobs that everyone had was difficult. But mine was, there was 4 of us in a unit of 135, and one of the guys didn't go outside the wire for various reasons, and I at the time, like, it's one of those things, like when I was 22, I wanted to go outside the wire. I wanted to be outside the wire. I wanted to be known as the type of guy who wanted to go outside the wire, and didn't want to be on base, because we even did that to each other. Like we would come back from a mission, and we'd be dirty and sweaty and whatnot. Who knows how long we were out on the road, and we'd walk right to the front of the chow line, basically shove everyone else in their clean uniforms out of the way, stomp through like we were king shit, and grab food, and then fill up our pockets with stuff, and then go back out. And we thought we were cooler than everyone else, but the truth is there was nothing cool about what we were doing. And so
absolutely. And as they say, often I've heard, there's 8 men or women, 8 people in support of each man in combat. So 8 out of 9 people did not experience the same thing that you did or that I did, And I have to say to you, David, I've said this before in person, but I have to tell you how much I respect your service as a medic, as a man who was willing to be part of a team and be part of an effort, even though you experienced the sense of having been lied to. And I think one of the ways in this whole proliferation of the hero aspect is very powerful. And as young men, we are very prone to wanting to be heroes. And we want to be the best that we can be. Now, in my growing up, I was this shortest and smallest, third smallest in
Same.
my class growing up. So I was never the first guy picked to be on the softball team or the baseball team or the football team. I kind of was friends with a lot of people, so I was included, but I would be near the end of the selection process. The other guy that was with me was a guy by the name of Bob, and I'll just say P, his last name. And we were the two kids at the end of the bench who never got into the game in baseball. So Bob turns out to be the only other guy from my small town that was in combat. No, I'm sorry, there's another guy as well. But there's three of us that faced combat during the Vietnam War. Many were in the military, but did not be at that front line kind of thing. And he served 2 years in combat with the Marines as a medic. And he came back, and this guy took the road of achievement as a way of getting over his PTSD. He became wealthy. He became a international businessman, et cetera, et cetera. Got the trophy wife and the whole 9 yards. But because of PTSD, it all fell apart. And I had a conversation with him yesterday. And he's, doesn't get out of bed. His PTSD has totally taken over. And but it's remarkable to me that this little guy and my little guy were the two guys that are least likely to be heroes, quote unquote. And by the way, I'm uncomfortable with that hero moniker also. So you never know who it is that you're standing next to. I never fired a weapon. I never had a rifle in my hand. No, I never shot a rifle or a pistol before I was in basic training.
No, me neither. I wasn't even around a weapon being fired until I was in basic training. I remember the first time at the range, even though I knew it was going to happen, being like, whoa, like that. And yeah, very, very similar. I want to shout out a new friend of mine, a new subscriber to our channel that I met at the Cosmic Summit a couple weeks ago. He's a we'll get to that, but he was a corpsman in the Navy and served as a combat medic for the Marines. His name is Ryan, I think. I think I messed that up last time. I kept calling him Mark because I'm terrible with names, but he was at the Cosmic Summit. I just want to shout him out just because meeting other medics is always good for me because I feel like, because you're talking, you said 1 out of 8 or something like that, and then
eight support people.
Yeah, and then there's probably person. 1 medic for every 30 combat people or something like that. Something like that. So yeah, we're a rare breed. So whether you're an Air Force or Navy corpsman or Army medic, I always enjoy meeting those guys, and they're often the most unassuming people that you'll meet. They're always often very quiet. I'm like, I don't want to embarrass this guy, but I was jealous of him because the people I was with wanted to sit right up front in this big auditorium. We were watching speakers and presentations and stuff. And during a few of these presentations, I sat with him because he was in the back, and that's where I like to sit. And most veterans who've seen combat, I spotted him from a mile away too. And that's why I said, "Hey, you're a veteran, aren't you?" And he's like, "Actually, yeah, I was." I was like, "What did you do?" He said, "I was a corpsman." I was like, we're my people, right? And then so I sat in the back with him a couple of times because that's where, if I was there alone, without a group of friends, I would have been sitting in the back with him, because it's not even something I think about really anymore. It's like, I just know, I go into a restaurant or wherever, I know I need to be in the aisle seat so I can make a quick exit. I know, like, it's like I know I need to see most people in the restaurant or in the theater. I can't have
Absolutely.
most of them behind me. I like to read the room. I like to assess for threats. Like, certain people give off certain, like, threatening energy, and I want to know who they are. So I totally shout out to Ryan. Nice to meet you at the Cosmic Summit. And yeah, man, PTSD is, you're talking about your friend, and it's taken over his life, and he's what?
Yeah.
He's in his late 70s or 80s now?
Yeah, he's 78, 79.
Yeah. And it's frustrating that you guys didn't get the same help that we got. When I got back, it was a pretty new thing, as far as I understand. When I got back from Iraq in 2006, and it took over my life almost immediately. Like I said, I was going down the rabbit hole of, finding out how much I was lied to. I also had this, like, morbid, I constantly, almost every day, would be watching things that blew up, like on the side of the road, videos on YouTube and other places of, like, IEDs going off for some reason, because I didn't enjoy it. I just was watching it. I would watch it all the time. I got really into drugs and alcohol and making stupid decisions, and it almost destroyed my life. And so having the VA available, even if it wasn't perfect, was at least some place I could turn to, because even within my own unit, I couldn't really turn to anyone, because, well, but one of the reasons why is because when you're the medic, you don't want anyone to know that you're having problems, because you want everyone to be able to rely on you. Then there's just, not just with being a medic, but just in general, you don't want to appear weak, and that was sort of what we were taught. And so that was like what it was like coming back for me. Was like, I think PTSD was just sort of in its infancy of being like a thing the VA treated consistently and identified it as sort of a disabling condition. But for you guys, I mean, what the hell was that like for you guys?
Coming back?
Yeah, like
Well,
coming back, and then, like, what was available? Nothing. Like, did you guys have any kind of resources available? And then,
well, we had VA as well. However, most Vietnam veterans saw the VA as a symbolic structure of that which sent us to war. And they were quite incapable of dealing with this phenomena that they call post-Vietnam syndrome, PVS.
PVS, or shell
And
shock.
and I was kind of, not because of any kind of anything about myself, but I found myself in the middle of that whole exploration. And it happened as a result of my being really interested in Vietnamese refugees and their plight about in the 1970s, there was about 1,000 Vietnamese families that were sent to the U.S. I think it was 76 or 77, something like that, after we had left Vietnam. And they were being terribly abused in Vermont, where I was. Farmers were taking advantage, and they were And I was interested in helping them because of my Vietnamese experience. And because even though I was in combat, there were times that I met Vietnamese people that I really came to love, that really came to know. And everyday people and the culture. So anyway, I did that. And as a result of that, I got earmarked by the chief of psychiatry at my local VA. This guy is a giant, Dr. Matthew Friedman, his name was. He has since started this whole PTSD research clinic. Anyway, he earmarked me because he knew I was from the community because of my social work. And I got an opportunity to work with veterans organizations. The VA was our enemy. There were guys like Bobby Mueller, who was the start of, and Rick Weidman and John Terrazzano, who started an organization called the Vietnam Veterans. I forget what this last word is, but they were operating within the Senate, U.S. Senate. They were veteran advocates, but they were dealing with all the issues of veterans politically. All three were combat vets. Bobby Mueller was, like myself, a platoon leader, and got shot to hell. And, he and Max Cleland were the two most famous wheelchair bound or wheelchair, veterans of the time. And by the way, do you want to hear about a little known issue around PTSD?
Yeah, of course.
This story has been authenticated, although I don't know that it's ever been written about. But amongst this group of veteran advocates, including myself, and I really couldn't, because I got hired to start the first vet center in the country, called the Vietnam Veterans Center, a counseling center for rehab, outpatient in the community for the VA. I got to observe a lot and know a lot of the things that were happening. And there was a guy who I knew quite well. He was. There was a group of 4 veterans that went to Washington, D.C. to meet with the medical director for the VA, the chief medical officer. And as you know, David, there's 2 parts to the VA. There's the benefits part, and then there's the medical part.
Yes.
And the veterans part gives people what they need in terms of educational benefits, job opportunities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Veterans benefits for disability. But the medicine people were there to provide, like you were, safety and support. And unfortunately, they were old school and dominated by a culture of World War II veterans, which were, yes, sir. Vietnam veterans were different. Vietnam veterans were like, WTF? What? What is going on? Why are you saying that, huh? Doesn't sound right to me. So there was that aspect of our group that handled aggression and handled authority very differently. That's an important point. And so we were necessarily in conflict with the VA, and there were a lot of things that came out that put the VA in a kind of a bad light. And fortunately, years later, as I look at it, the VA has really changed quite a bit. It's a lot more open and a lot more people that are there to help veterans. To us, back then, we were seen as a pain in the butt.
Mm.
Because we said things and we confronted things, etc. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting off the story here. So there's these four guys, and they go to meet with this officer, this head of the VA medical, and
Mm-hmm.
they thought they thought they would be able to talk rationally with this guy because he was a Vietnam era vet. He hadn't served in the war, but he was from that era. And we thought it would be, or these guys thought, I wasn't part of it, that they could talk with this guy into accepting the idea that war was producing mental health issues.
Mm.
And they didn't have the word PTSD at the time, but that's what they were talking about. So they go to meet with this guy, and what they found was someone that wasn't interested in hearing what they had to say, and told them, absolutely not. We will never, ever, ever create the kind of changes that you want to make, because we don't believe that really is an effect of the war. It must be something from their childhood, their toilet training. They just were crazy when they were already, et cetera, et cetera. And something magical happened. And that is that one of the guys of the four had brought a hammer and some nails. They took this guy hostage for about 4 hours. They nailed shut the door to his office, and they wouldn't allow him to leave until he heard their stories.
Wow.
And it must have been very poignant, because at the end he said, okay, we'll create a study to see what's up.
Amazing.
Off of that came this program that I was mentioning earlier, the Vet Center program.
Mm-hmm.
And there were originally 13 offices opened, 13 centers. And now there's probably over 400 around the country.
Can you tell everyone what the function of the Vet Center is? What's the structure and function?
Yeah, the idea is that it's veteran oriented. So it's almost all the people that are at the Veterans Center providing health, nutrition, counseling, alcohol and drug rehab on a clinical basis. So, and they typically were 4-person teams.
Mm-hmm.
A secretary, a team leader, and 2 counselors.
Mm-hmm. And everyone was a veteran, usually.
Typically, yes, or very pro-veteran, or spouse veteran.
Right, spouse. Yeah, exactly.
So anyhow, that created an opening for people in the medical field to do research. And as I mentioned, Matt Friedman earlier was one of only three. Think about how many VA centers and hospitals there are. But Matt Friedman was one of 3 chiefs of psychiatry that were in favor of this program.
Wow.
And Matt, besides the fact that he's a brilliant guy and with a great heart, but he was married to a nurse from Vietnam. And of course, she shared with him a lot of her coming back home and dealing with, issues that had to do with surgery and healing and death and all that kind of stuff. Her name was Gail, and she was one of the leaders in the nurses movement to become recognized, because as women, they were left out, like many of the women were left out in history, over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's how it all started. And then it grew. And then in, I believe, 1981, Matt was part of a group of psychiatrists that formulated the diagnosis and then set it forward to be approved and published in what was called a DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM, of mental illness. And so it became an approved diagnosis. Now, the importance of that is that when we told our stories, we were diagnosed because there was nothing else in the DSM. We were diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenics.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, because in Vietnam, in your war, in every war, it is a functional thing to do, to be paranoid.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. That's how you. That's a survival thing. It's similar to growing up in a shitty, dangerous neighborhood. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. So anyway, that was so different than where the VA was coming from, and when we came home, that when you came home, there was the country, through the advocacy of Vietnam veterans, veterans in Congress. I mentioned Max Cleland, who was a Vietnam vet, combat vet, who became head of the VA. A lot of changes were made, and the VA was really opened up. So today, I consider the VA kind of a friend. Now, it's a friend that's under duress with the politics of today and money saving and all that. You don't know who you're going to contact when you call the VA, if you're
right.
primary care doctor or your social worker are still working.
We talked about this yesterday. I have a new primary care doctor every 6 months, and I think before we started recording, I was sharing the story about how I had 3 referrals put in for some appointments I need, and nobody called me. And then I got a letter saying they tried to call me, and then the letter said, call us in 14 days or your appointment's going to be canceled. And then I called, but the appointment was canceled because the letter came late. So yeah, I get it. It is under duress. It's not a perfect, efficient system.
But I'm very grateful for it today.
Me too. And I'm very grateful for guys like you and your generation who had to push that needle forward.
Yeah.
And a shout out to the generation before you, the Korean War guys and the World War II guys, because they had nothing. And like, they call it the greatest generation, and in many ways they were. But what people don't know is a lot of those men like died very young, had horrible alcohol and addiction problems. They had very difficult time forming good relationships with their spouse and their kids after that, because they just didn't know nobody knew what was. It was just like, oh yeah, dad or grandpa went to the war, so stay out of his way, right? And that was it. And it took an evolution, right? There's an evolution to the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I hope it doesn't need more evolution, knock on wood. And I don't want to get into politics of today, but I hope we don't do this again and make this mistake again and have to evolve the VA even more, because like, come on, man.
Well, there's a statistic that I heard, and I think I actually even validated it at one point. There's only been 13 years that our country has not been at war.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's wild.
back a
That's
ways,
insane.
back a ways, you were talking about the vision of America that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think also one of the things that happened for me and for many, many Vietnam veterans is that the promises and the beliefs that we had in our country were found to be false.
Yeah.
When I first arrived in Vietnam, I was in a bus and there was a screen on the windows of the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to somebody, "Hey, why do you think they have these like bars on the wall on the windows?" And he said, well, "That's so they can't throw a hand grenade in here." And me, Catholic school kid coming out of like small town, naive 23, 24-year old, yeah, 24. I said, "Wait a minute, I thought we were here to help these people.
Mm.
Why would they throw a hand grenade in here?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that moment my eyes started to open as to what was really going on.
Yeah.
Was not our largesse, but our, let's say, control and domination of a culture.
Yeah.
And Vietnam had never had a self rule. They always had been dominated by China or Japan or France. And then when the French were defeated to get rid of them, and by the way, Ho Chi Minh, who everybody referred to as Uncle Ho because he was so much a hero of his
Mm-hmm.
country, Ho Chi Minh came to the United States, asked for the United States to help with their political situation with the French. The U.S. not only refused, but then jumped into the breach and took over for the French in trying to dominate the politics of Vietnam. And as a result of that, a lot of problems ensued. And Uncle Ho had the United States said to Uncle Ho, "Okay, we'll work with you." Because this was a guy that was educated
Mm-hmm.
in France. He was a giant in the political world. Ho Chi Minh, we never would have had to have the war, and what 50 some thousand young men and women died in Vietnam, and then afterwards, you know, for example, I had 30 guys in my platoon, and there's only about 10 of them
Mm-hmm.
still alive. Most of whom died after coming back, some suicide, some other kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
pretty significant stuff we're talking about.
Yeah. Very. And
David, can I say
yeah,
one
yeah, of
last thing?
course.
Okay, about being a
Yeah.
combat medic. I don't know if you remember this guy or not, but there was a guy at VVSD that we worked with, and he was a big African American guy with a black T-shirt, and he was a corpsman with the Navy with the Marines.
Did he
And
work
on
there
the,
or was he a patient?
he was a
Okay.
patient, and he wore this T-shirt that it said, "Before they call God or Mother, they say corpsman
Right.
up."
Yeah.
So, in a time of desperation, life, death, people like you had to step into that breach and be
Yeah.
there.
Walt's talking about Veterans Village of San Diego. That's where him and I met back in, I think, 2014. It no longer exists in the same form that it did, but it was a homeless in substance use treatment facility for veterans, and probably the most populated area of the country for veterans besides here in Georgia. And yeah, it was an interesting place. Walt and I got to had the privilege of being able to start and run a combat veteran group for young veterans, because most of the veterans there were after Vietnam, and so they didn't see combat, or and then there was a small group of young guys that were like post 9/11 Afghanistan and Iraq veterans who had seen combat, and so we got to run that group. But yeah, the being a medic's a weird thing. The guy Ryan, he said to me something that like I know all too well. Ryan, that I met a few weeks ago. He said, you know, you're there. You're in the field. You're their doctor, their primary care doctor, their emergency medical technician. You're their therapist. He said, and we always joke about this, but this is real. Okay, like I can't tell you how many times I've had a guy knock on my door in the middle of the night for either because his girlfriend or his wife was screwing around on him, or there was problems going on at home and he was having emotional issues, or, hey doc, you got to look at my balls. Like, and this is real. Like I got something great, and you got to, it's part of the job, man. So, and it's almost always like, you know, a rash of some kind.
Did you ever? Yeah. Did you ever get hit up for drugs?
Once or twice. Yeah, once or twice, but it wasn't like in a overt way. It was more like a drug-seeking behavior, right? Where they were, you know, trying to get either an opiate or like anxiety medication. But honestly, I didn't have access to like benzodiazepines or anything like that in Iraq. We did have access to opiates, but we got trained really, really well to like spot like drug-seeking behavior at that time, and that was all controlled very well as well. And a part of my job for the first like 6 months or 4 to 6 months I was in Iraq was I was ordering all the medical supplies for the clinic and for our small fob. So I knew exactly how much of the different opiates were coming in and coming out, and so it was kind of my job to keep track of that stuff. But people would like there was medics in the clinic who, you know, took liberties with that with their friends and things like that. It was a thing. So,
you know, the medics in Vietnam, in their bag they carried morphine. Mm-hmm. You did, yeah. And so that unfortunately some medics self-medicated with their morphine, and that's a whole other thing. The pressure on a medic is so great.
Yeah.
Now, I had two of them. I had two medics in my platoon. One that came to me because this is not bragging or anything else like that. I'm not trying to self-aggrandize myself, but our platoon was a really powerful and efficient killing unit. We saw a good bit of combat, and we were pretty successful. So successful that one medic who had been with the recon unit, a brigade recon unit, petitioned to come to our platoon because he felt like he could be there where the action was, so to speak. And he was with us for 6 months or so. There was another, and he was very aggressive. He was a Hispanic guy. He was very aggressive. He was very bright light, this guy. Then we had another medic who was quiet and kind of introverted and didn't have the pizzazz that the first guy had, but he had been there even longer and was so different personalities, different approaches, but in the same way, both were needed in the same kind of way. And to my great joy, were very effective in what they did.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because medics are they're all different, right? And I one of the things that I took upon myself, and I hope I'm remembered this way, but I would often be a comedian, not only for myself, but just to take the edge off. I would say some of the most ridiculous things that I would never ever say now, and my mom would probably be so disappointed in me, but it was in a I like to make the guys laugh. I like to act goofy. I like to say stupid stuff. And part of that is, they always say, emergency department doctors and nurses often have a morbid sense of humor. Well, so did I. And so did we, not just the medics, the guys in my unit, because it did take the edge off. It made light of really just ugly situations. And sometimes I look back on that and I do feel ashamed, that I was making fun of situations like that. But I do understand it was a survival tactic and that kind of thing. But it's something that sticks with me. That it was part of my shtick was being not only was I the medic, I was a comedian as well. I wanted to ask you, Walt, this is kind of a sensitive question, and it came up a couple of days ago when I was surfing Twitter, and there was a guy. This kind of goes along with what we're talking about, but there was a guy sort of explaining his experience in Iraq or in Afghanistan as a combat guy, and he was trying to explain he was trying to be open and honest and raw about his experience. And then there was people on there jumping on. Some people were appreciated it. Some people were surprised and shocked by the things he was saying. And there was other people that were basically you're a piece of shit. You're a war criminal, they were calling him. And I found his response to those guys who were calling him people that were calling him a war criminal. And he said basically to them, I'll paraphrase, but it was along the lines of, you can call me that all you want. It's not going to be worse than anything I call myself. Because when you come back from, when you have that experience and you do things that you need to do to survive, and they go against your built-in cultural and personal and spiritual moral compass, and then you come home, there are guys out there that are legit sociopaths who do a great job in combat, and then they come back and they're fine. But most of us, I know that you guys, Vietnam guys, had that probably in the worst way because of everything that was going on politically at the time. And I just wanted to ask, do you, when somebody calls you or you hear something like that, it's do you have the same reaction? Because I had the same reaction that guy did, which is you cannot call me worse than I call myself.
What a beautiful thing to say. No, my experience was different than that. Well, yeah, there was a lot of criticism, but I never took any of it to heart because I felt as an infantry officer that I was superior to everybody else. It's one of the things that got me through. the longer I was in combat, the less armament I wore. I didn't wear steel pot anymore. I wore just like a do-rag or a hat or something like that, soft hat. I dared the enemy to kill me. Not that I was suicidal, but I felt, and many of us felt the same way, that as long as we didn't believe that we were going to be vulnerable, it wasn't going to happen. And I had several guys that I knew who predicted their own death that shouldn't have even known about it. And and they died. They were killed. And so this whole defense, mental defense of saying you can't get me to be vulnerable, I took with me when I came back home. And so if someone said something like that to me, I would have probably cursed them out or something, or said nothing and walked away. Now that I have a little bit of age and a little bit of self-compassion, yes, I can say that there's so many things that I did or participated in that I don't feel good about. And that idea of the self-incrimination comes to me now in my later years.
Interesting. Self-incrimination. Yeah, that's it. That's definitely it. Yeah, and so back on the theme of 4th of July and celebrating the United States, and what it should stand for, and what it
and isn't. If you look at it in the world, the way we're seen, not the way that we pretend to be.
No. Well, yeah, we're not seen that way either. Like, I remember, I'd never had somebody look at me with like pure hatred before until I went to Iraq. Like, somebody looked me right in the eyes, and I knew that they hated me. And not because they hated me, but as an individual, but they hated what I stood for. They hated why I was there. They hated my country. And I get it. I do. I get it. And we talked a little bit earlier about war as a racket and the money that gets made and whatnot. And this whole thing started popping off, and I don't want to turn this into like any sort of political thing. We'll keep it straight on the war stuff. But when this stuff started, when we bombed as a country those Iranian nuclear facilities a few weeks ago, or whenever that was, that was very hard for me, because I'm like, oh no, here we go again, right? Like what is this the beginning of, right? Like, are we going to get involved in this again? How many young guys? Because it's not going to be me this time, Walt. I'm 43. You're what, 80? Like, we're not going. But a bunch of young men going to get brainwashed into going,
And by the way, now it's also women.
Exactly. Yeah, a bunch of young men and women going to get sent over there and have a similar experience that I did, because I don't want that at all, and most veterans don't. And so I just wanted to I'm just saying this out loud just to bring attention to the fact that, like, typically when what we're told on TV, or in your day, TV and newspapers, or what we're told online and on social media nowadays about war and the reasons why we're going and all this stuff, is usually propaganda and lies. It's usually a carefully curated narrative in order to get young men and women to answer the call, and be a hero, and be part of something bigger. And it just goes to lining people's pockets, politicians, contracting companies, all these things. And I just hope that the new generation can see through that and says no this time, you know?
Yep. That's a big task. And it's kind of like dealing with a steamship, heading towards Europe from New York City, going full steam and then trying to turn around.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we're faced with the power of that.
It's the military-industrial complex that was it? Some president was the first one to coin that term. Eisenhower. Yeah, and it's a
who was the general Eisenhower.
And he warned us about that. About how war is a racket. There's a book, in fact, called "War is a Racket" that I won't read because it just I don't like here. I know it's a racket. All right. I can tell you just in relation to my unit. We were a National Guard unit out of Iowa. A group of brave, strong, country, farm Iowa guys. Most of whom were retrained to from different jobs, like they were had jobs like support roles, and they were trained to be military police before we went to Iraq, so that they could operate as a military police unit in Iraq. And then the U.S. government had these contracts with these contracting companies that were then going to do the cooking and the engineering and the communication setups and different things like that. And then they were paying these contracting companies so much money and paying these contractors so much money to do that, paying us not so much at all, and retraining us to do like a job that a lot of us weren't trained to do. And that just goes to show you how much of a racket that was, because we had the guys that could have done the work that they were paying the contractors to do. That's what the Army is. The Army is, like you said, 8-to-1 combat. There's 8 for every one combat guy. There's 8 support jobs that do plumbing, that do engineering, that do communications. And so that was the thing that I noticed almost immediately. Was wait a second, who are these guys? And then you'd start to find out how much these guys were getting paid. And I'm not mad at them. Like, if you got hired for $200,000 to go, lead an engineering team or whatever for 6 months in Iraq, good on you. But what a racket! And then if you trace back I'm not going to get into the details, but if you trace back like the political connections to these contracting companies, people should be in jail, and they're not.
Absolutely.
And I'm talking politicians. The politicians who were colluding with contracting companies and spending basically blank checks worth of money, and doing jobs that the military has trained young men to do, and instead train them to do the combat role instead, is just disgusting. All right. That's the biggest lie that we were sold. And I can't even tell you what, I don't want to get into the politics. There's some people who are very passionate about what's happening right now in the Middle East. And I don't even know if we'll know what's really happening for 5 or 10 years from now. I don't know. But what I can say for sure is, we're not being told the full truth. There are people who want to go to war, and they want the contracts, and they want to make money, and they don't give a shit about First Lieutenant Walt Rutherford or Specialist or Sergeant Floyd, or anyone in between. They don't care. And so I just wanted to mention that because it's you're right. It would be like turning the Titanic around. But
yeah,
I do believe that this generation of young people is less likely to be tricked by this kind of thing because they had so much more access to information, right? They can see all the different
yeah.
stories. They can see all the different sides of the story because they have access to the internet. And so I'm hoping we can turn that Titanic around, because if you poll, Walt, an average American, like almost every one of them is going to say, no, I don't want to go to war. Can we stop doing that, please?
Yeah,
What did you say? 13 years out of however many we've been a country, like 300 years.
yeah. 1776 to
Yeah, 13
2025.
years. Yeah,
A lot of years.
that is. And I think people are starting to wake up to how much money's being, like how much of their money's being spent on bullshit wars, and then not just spent on the war, but then spent on medical care and mental health care for the veterans afterwards. It goes on forever, Walt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's a drain on the economy, etc. Now, I was honored to be part of a reception in San Diego for a group of Russian vets from Afghanistan. And when they left Afghanistan after their war, in Afghanistan war, they came back to Russia and got the same treatment that we got back here. And some people from there decided they wanted to come and talk to the Vietnam veterans because somehow or another we had done a lot for ourselves because nobody else was there to help, or not many people were there to help. There were people there. And, they visited for like 2 weeks. We spent a lot of downtime with them, relaxing and talking and et cetera, et cetera. And it was quite a opening to say, these guys have experienced the same exact thing internally from combat and internally and externally from the politics of their country. And so that was a very powerful thing. I'd like to share with you, though, what you were talking about before and how it happened for me, and that is the realization of corporate monies and where it's going and all that stuff. In a combat situation, I was in a helicopter, Huey, Slick, we called him. Did you guys call him Slicks?
I don't think so. No, never heard that before.
Yeah, we called them Slicks. They were Huey with the big door, fit about 8 or 10 people in it with a couple of door gunners, a couple of pilots. And I was in one of those, and I was doing a resupply of water and ammunition for my old platoon. And this was in Cambodia during the Cambodian invasion, which, by the way, our government was saying that we weren't
correct
in Cambodia. Yeah. But so I'm in this helicopter. We're shooting at the North Vietnamese who were shooting at us. And it was what they call a hot LZ, landing zone hot. And I noticed that as we fired our tracer rounds, but what I'm talking about, the color of them are orange, right? And the enemy firing back had tracers that were green. And it dawned on me, wait a minute, who designed it so that these different warriors would have different colors? So the whole idea of a tracer is you see where your bullets are going.
Yep.
Right? And for somebody who's not been there, just it's kind of like a straight line. If you're at night and turn on a flashlight, it seems like there's a whole
Yes.
light, right, that goes out, and it seems kind of solid. Well, when you have a tracer round, and I think it's something like every 4 rounds have some magnesium or something on the tip, and when it's fired, it burns, and it burned orange for us. So we could see where we're firing, and they could see where they were firing. Now, what hit me was like, if this wasn't a planned situation, we'd all be firing the same kind of tracer rounds. And there would be difficulty in that because we couldn't tell our bullets that we're sending to the bullets we're receiving. And so here in this very moment, it just hit me like, wait a minute. I think the people that are making these weapons are kind of on the same team, and they've
Yes.
worked out this issue. And it was quite shocking to me, and I still and it was the first of many situations after that I could say corporate issues with guns and military and
it reminds me, Walt, of just the boil us down to like a bucket of plastic army men. Here's the green ones, here's the beige ones, here's the brown ones, right? It's like, here's your orange tracers, here's your green tracers, right? Like, it's like that and that's just ridiculous. And it is a racket, and I hope we do not go down that path again. But I wanted to, as we move towards the end of our discussion, talk a little bit more about PTSD, what it is, and this doesn't just have to be related to military, but and then how people can get help, and what are the things that were good for you, and that kind of thing. And so, if you would, what is PTSD, and just for the audience, generally speaking.
I won't quote it in clinical terms. However, PTSD is a diagnosis. It's a way of describing an experience. And when someone experiences a trauma, and you're very right, it could be a wife who's being abused by her husband, or a kid who is being starved because, I won't get into that. But somebody that's being molested, somebody, and they have the very same reaction or experience to this fearful event. And you used the word anxiety before. And so there's an ability of the mind to take painful circumstances and put it away and hold it kind of like in reserve or in storage. And with PTSD, despite that, we have experiences that trigger those memories. Why? It's because in the mental framework, we are experiencing something that makes us feel the same way as when we were traumatized. And so a bunch of different kind of behaviors have been seen and researched and explored from this triggering. And also the treatments have come from that. So there was to me, a giant in the field of psychology named Carl Rogers. And Carl Rogers said, in order to heal, what you need, warmth. I'll try to quote him: warmth, empathy, and unconditional positive regard are necessary and sufficient to create
Wow.
healing. So the treating person who is treating somebody with a trauma, if they're able to be in relationship and hold space with that person to go down and dirty into those depths of the trauma reaction and where they're connected to. Because I don't think anybody gets through life without some trauma.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And many of us have 5 or 6 traumas that lead up to, and we're able to process and put them away. And then all of a sudden another one comes along and it's too much to handle. And so one saying is that if you want to see what PTSD is, take your house cat, put it in the backyard, and let off a bunch of firecrackers next to it. And what you're going to see is a cat that is like,
yeah.
That's PTSD. That's what's happened to us. We put into situations that are beyond normal life experiences. Now, because PTSD came in with veterans, it's seen as a veteran malady, but there now number far more many people with PTSD who never served in the military than people who do serve in the military.
Correct, because like you said, you don't get through life without trauma typically. Even being bullied, you can have PTSD from being bullied.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
And that hold space for someone is something I'm very familiar with because I've had good therapists who did that for me. But one of the things that I did,
and also, wait, hold on. And you yourself are a terrific
thank you.
therapist.
I appreciate that. Selfishly, the reason I went back to school to get into mental health and become a therapist was I was trying to learn about myself, and I was trying to learn about my friends that I had deployed with, and I was also like on the fast track to hell, man. I was without getting into too many details, I was on my way to prison, and I needed to do something like drastic to make sure that didn't happen. So I went back to school. I took my physical health, meaning eating, sleeping, exercising, like very seriously, and all those things led me to to a place where I could live with myself. But it's one of those things, like I say selfishly, because I did give back a lot, as you know. Like I served the veteran community for 10 years probably. I don't do that anymore. I've done my time, but a lot of it was for me because like I was trying to get better myself. I was trying to learn how to get healthy and teach other people at the same time. These are the things that I would say. And if you could add on to this, if you're somebody out there who's struggling with trauma that hasn't been treated, that hasn't been, maybe you're just identifying it now, and you don't know what to do or where to go. We'll list some things like the VA, the hotline down below, and other stuff in the chat. But the first thing like you need to do is tell like a healthcare provider who can refer you to counseling, because you're going to need that.
Yeah.
Number one. And then the things that really help me, and this is what I tell everyone, is you've got to take control of the things that are in your control in your life. So if you're dealing with a mental health issue related to any mental health issue, really, but we're talking about PTSD here, and you're eating like shit, and you're drinking, and you're doing drugs, and you're staying up all night, and you're not exercising, and you're not setting goals, and you're not being involved in your community, and you're isolating yourself, you're making it worse, and it's only going to get worse from there. You can take control of one thing at a time, and you can say, you know what, I'm gonna lay off the booze. I'm gonna get help with that. I'm going to start getting involved in my community to the capacity that I can. I'm going to start taking care of my body, because that's one of the huge things for me, was when I was eating like shit and getting fat and gaining weight and staying up too late and not exercising, not going outside, looking at the internet all day. That's when I felt the worst, and I had to slowly knock all those bad habits off of my routine, and I had to get a lot of help. And I do want to shout out to like the 8 therapists that I've had over the last 20 years, because they all helped me in one way or another during difficult times in my life. And you need somebody who who wants to hold that space for you, and they're not going to judge you. And you can say the things that you're ashamed of. You can say the things that you are that you're scared to say out loud, and they'll help you reframe how you think about those things. And
Yeah.
It's a lifelong thing. But if you don't take action, your own personal action, and ask for help, you're going to keep going down that rabbit hole. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's just kind of my, in a nutshell, philosophy on dealing with mental health and dealing with, because you need people. Okay. And it makes you want to isolate. Well, it makes you want to be by yourself. It makes you want to drink. It makes you want to do drugs. It makes you want to indulge the negative thoughts about yourself and about the world around you. And you cannot do that. You have to ask for help.
Absolutely. Yes. A couple of points that I'd like to underline that you have shared around drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
In a way, I have to say that the drugs and alcohol that I did when I came back from Vietnam could be looked at as like being a jerk, being irresponsible, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
However, I've come to see it as that was part of my treatment. Because if PTSD is anything, it's anxiety and fear focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, so in order for a human being, if you're out of balance, you're either going to be experiencing extreme anxiety or depression. And PTSD, of course, touches both. There's both of those experiences. But if you look at it from the standpoint of drugs, alcohol, getting fat, eating, they were all for you. This is the way I handle it. They were all vehicles for you to get to the place where you had to say enough is enough.
Right.
But in the meantime, you were treating PTSD, but there was a much more powerful tool. And that is sobriety, all the things that you outlined, trust, connection with another human being. Sometimes all we need is the human touch.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm quoting Jackson Brown there now. But I think that as I look at it, you know, Dave, I'm sober. I just celebrated at Easter time 48 years of sobriety. I haven't had a drink in
Amazing.
about 48 years.
Amazing.
Now, that's one day at a time through Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm still involved with the program. I sponsor people. I have a sponsor. I work the steps. I read the literature. I go to meetings. And this kind of effort is what it has taken for me to kind of feel a bit sane.
Yeah.
And so the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous is admitting that you have a problem.
Yeah.
And some say, in fact, my father-in-law, who I never met, who was a psychologist, my wife's father, Bonnie's father, as a therapist, used to say it's like 80% of the work is admitting the problem. And once you have that kind of honesty with self, then these other actions take place, like reaching out to another person. We can't do it alone.
Nope. I tried that a lot.
Yeah. Me too. Yep. This is a wonderful chat we're having. And I really thank you for how you are so dedicated to veterans, but also to things beyond veterans affairs. And I know the Multi-Universe podcast looks at a lot of different kinds of things, not just veterans issues. Would you tell us more about the Cosmic Summit?
Yeah. So that comes up a lot on our show, but it's a good place to move towards the end of the episode because it's something that it's something that I've been looking into since I was a child, far before I ever went to the military. And then there was a 10-year period where I was in the military, and about 5 or 6 years after, where I wasn't really thinking about this subject. And now I have the opportunity to think about it a lot and look into it and meet researchers and read books and watch podcasts and learn about this topic. But the topic is really goes along with our humanity's shared history, humanity's shared heritage, and I mean us as a whole, and where did our civilization come from? And and a lot of these, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years ago, all these ideas were basically controlled by institutions like archaeology and Egyptology and things like that, where they basically decided 100 years ago that they had all the answers to where we came from as a species and where we came from as a civilization and how it started. But what we're coming to learn and coming to find out through independent researchers and brave researchers within the institutions is that our civilization, it didn't just we weren't for 300,000 years just hunter-gatherers, and then all of a sudden, 6,000 BC, we became a civilization. Technology and civilization is something has been ebbing and flowing for who knows how long, maybe tens of thousands of years. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that humanity's technological abilities this is not the peak of it, and that our ancestors, they were way smarter a lot longer ago than we realize. This is where you get into ideas
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Atlantis and things like that. But the evidence shows that a cataclysm happened around 10,500 BC that is being called the Younger Dryas incident. It's either an impact hypothesis or a solar flare, whatever it was, reset civilization. And we're basically is what Graham Hancock would call a species with amnesia, and that we have forgotten. And there's certain places in the world that like places in Turkey, places in Egypt, places in Peru, that are signatures and messages from our civilization before, that a lot of people call Atlantis, right? It doesn't. Plato called Atlantis, and so the Cosmic Summit is an event that Mike, Dave, and Brittany and I went to. Mike and I went to for the second time a few weeks ago, and it's researchers, content creators, academics, all coming together, presenting evidence and information, trying to piece together this story of our shared heritage that's been basically I don't know how else to call it, but it's been we were told with that we knew everything about our history and there's nothing else to learn, and that's bullshit.
Yes.
And nowadays, it's kind of, a lot of more people are getting involved in this. You do not need a degree in archaeology or Egyptology or anything. There's all the information's out there. You can do your own studies. You can do your own reading and come to your own conclusions, and then have those ideas tested. And that's what the Cosmic Summit's about. Is they're bringing those ideas together. They have 5 or 6 researchers all talking about their theories of where the center of that civilization was, Atlantis, and presenting archaeological and geological evidence and all kinds of things. And it was really a joy for me, because that's why I said since I was 10 years old, I've been watching documentaries and reading things about ancient Egypt and thinking, this doesn't make sense. How the hell did they build that stuff with copper chisels and hammers? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, they supposedly didn't have the wheel, but they built these magnificent structures, and it just doesn't make any sense. But what was cool for me was I mentioned this to you yesterday when we caught up, and you were like, "Oh yeah, Atlantis and Lemuria and all this stuff," and you're like, "Yes, I've known Walt for, I don't know, 12 years now." I did not know that he was like into that kind of topic. So I was curious what your thoughts are on like an event like that, the Cosmic Summit, and our shared ancestry and our shared past. And then we'll end the discussion on this.
I totally believe in exploring the unexplored and exploring the explored deeper. And I think that these kinds of things, look, I have been buzzing on this Cosmic Summit since you mentioned it a couple of days ago. And I love it. I think it is a great thing to do, because the arrogance of us saying that we know everything right now, when the universe itself is the majority of which is black hole. We start to get into that, and what is a black hole but the unknown? And so the unknown around us, the unknown is far greater than the known.
Right, exactly. It's always been that way.
So, yeah, and so us trying to be more than what we are, which may be one of the mandates of living this life, is the attempt to grow under circumstances that might stop us. I think it's summits like that bring people together and to have these kind of conversations.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm trying to find the Socrates saying. I just found it. The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. And
Isn't
well, it
that the
is
truth?
because, like you mentioned, the unknown outnumbers the known like a gazillion to one, you know. And so I
Yeah.
like how you put it when you said that you believe in exploring the unknown and looking deeper into what we already know, because you know for 100 years they were saying things about our shared past and our shared human history that just quite frankly just aren't true. And it's not to crap on Egyptology. I think there's a bunch of stuff that they do well and that they do in a systematic way, and same with archaeology in general. But humans love to have like a narrative, and we love to be like, yep, this is it, this is the truth, no need to ask any more questions.
We can count on it.
No need to ask any more questions. And the Cosmic Summit's all about asking those questions. And so getting involved in that community has been great. We interviewed a bunch of people, speakers and researchers, and made a bunch of friends this year. And it was really cool. And it's really kind of become the centerpiece of the podcast. And so I'm really proud of it. So I did send you some podcasts to watch in relation to it, Walt. So
I got it this morning. I'm going to follow up.
Yeah, look into those episodes. And I think I'm going to send you the Danny Hillman one as well, because they have this pyramid in Indonesia where they think it could be up to 20, even 30,000 years old. And we got to interview the foremost leader in the research in that area that's currently shut down. Like that's another thing is global systems tend to shut down these looking into these discoveries and stuff for a variety of reasons, but one of them being they turn these places into like Disneyland, like tourist attractions, and then they set up like ways to make money off of it, and then with no intention of actually like really finding out, doing actual real research there. They'll put an archaeologist or an academic on staff just to say that they have one and pay them a bunch of money, but really they're just trying to go, look at this cool place that we know everything about, come take a look at it and we'll tell you all about it. It's really silly, and so that's happening in Indonesia, that's happening in Egypt, that's happening in Turkey. But I just think there's so much, Walt, more to discover about our history, and it's really, to me, the most interesting, fascinating topic. So
absolutely,
I can't wait to go ahead.
I really respect that, David, and your ability to go to the greater viewpoint and to hold out hope for new knowledge. I think it's awesome.
I gotta know. I need to know. Okay, it's like, can you imagine if 15,000 years ago we had a technological civilization, that the technology looked very different, maybe spiritually they looked very different than us, but physically they were basically exactly the same as us. And they were walking around trading and creating art and building incredible things. And then all of a sudden, because this planet isn't static, Walt, it changes all the time. It changes slowly, but sometimes it changes drastically, very quickly. And we're survivors as a species. And I think we'll end on this, because that's like PTSD is a way to survive. It's your brain's way to adapt and survive. And all the stories of flood myths and gods and this and that is a cultural sort of memory that every culture across the world has. It's almost like a form of teaching ourselves about like who we are, and teaching ourselves about how resilient we are, and how we're a species who survives, how we can get wiped out by a giant flood. I mean, this is the story in the Bible. And then we make preparations, and then certain ones of us survive and carry on as a species, right? And I think it's our greatest trait is that we're a species of survivors.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, David, for having me.
Thank you, Walt, for your
I
second
sure
appearance.
appreciate the conversation. Yeah, and look forward to watching this podcast and watching more of your podcast, because I think you're doing a great service to those of us who can connect.
Thank you,
with
Walt.
you.
Thank you. And I really love you, man. And I love, catching up with you. And you're an inspiration to me. And I look forward to seeing you again, visiting you in Oregon in the next couple of years. And I look forward to bringing you back on the show. I want you to go deep into this Cosmic Summit stuff and this and some of the podcasts. And you're really gonna you and Bonnie are really gonna like it. So thank you so much, everyone. Peace, and we will, peace and love. And we'll talk to Walt again in the future. And last but not least, happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July,
Enjoy
everyone.
the freedoms that we have in this country.